you can't really help the world from burning if your house is on fire. Once I accepted that, and like the real true quantum nature of healing, that it ripples out and it has these outsized effects that we can't see. It was like a massive relief because I'm like, oh, I actually don't have to change it all.
Welcome to Reclaiming Consciousness. I'm Elise Bassine, trauma and breathwork expert and creator of the Metamorphosis Method, the only methodology bridging the gap between spiritual healing and clinical trauma work. For many years, our consciousness has been hijacked by societal and cultural programming, religion, the media, and familial and ancestral trauma. In this podcast, you'll discover my unique perspective on trauma healing and how it is the gateway to fully reclaiming your consciousness. You'll hear stories and teachings that expand your mind as you discover how every relationship challenge, business block, or limiting pattern is an invitation to reclaim the parts of your consciousness you unknowingly gave away. Get ready to go deep. Now let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. So I'm super excited to introduce you to today's guest. I think we're going to have an amazing conversation because we already had one so far on her podcast. So Aubrey Morgan Yee, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here and be with you again.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited to chat with you because we had such a great conversation before.
So much energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why don't we just start out? If you could just introduce yourself and a little bit of your story and just kind of how you got to where you are now.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's always such an interesting question. There's so many ways to go. But so I'm here in Hawaii. Yeah, this is my home. I feel called to share that up front because it does feel like a place that's informed my life quite a bit. I've lived here most of my life, left for a few years, but this is my ground and place. A mother of 2 kids. Also feels like that's really important in my life. My work is as a futurist. Some people don't know what that means, but it's basically someone who productively studies and cultivates the future. The futures with an S, right? So how do we think about the futures that we're coming into as like this beautiful open canvas that we get to co-create? That's really my life's work, is helping people remember that we're always co-creating the futures together. That's a piece that feels really important. I got my doctorate in that field of study with political science, and Indigenous politics is another piece of that. And that's been a big piece of what I do in systems alchemy, systems transformation work. Also leadership development has been a big piece of what I do. And now I work with a couple different organizations that are doing similar sorts of missions, all connected to healing Earth in this time of systems breakdown, polycrisis, whatever you might want to call it. So I'm really curious about how we get people engaged in remembering that we're all co-creators of the future.
I love everything you shared so far. I'd love to just hear kind of how you got into this work.
Yeah, it's a good story. So I was a reluctant entrepreneur out of college. I was an English major, ready to save the world, and then met my partner, now husband, and we shared this really incredible love of travel. And I had lived in Indonesia when I was in college, and long story short, we ended up starting this import business out of Indonesia. And so I spent about 7 years in the business world, and I sort of just learned by books and trying to figure it all out. And I, looking back now, realize that gave me this insight into sort of how the world works from a financial perspective, from a capitalist perspective. And that's really informed my work around systems change and understanding some of the things that are creating these issues on our planet right now, really seeing from the inside. I would go to these factories in Indonesia and see places where, sort of production happens, right? And so I was this reluctant entrepreneur. And then one day I had this just full awakening when I saw this massive tree in a warehouse that was going to be cut up. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm participating in this whole system. And so I was like, okay, I've got to do something else. And I decided to go back to school, and I didn't know what I was going to study, but I, live in Hawaii, and this is our home, and we knew we were going to be here. So I'm like, well, I'll just go to the University of Hawaii and see what they've got. Started taking courses and saw this course called Politics of the Future. And I was like, that's interesting. Looked at the reading list, totally resonated with either books I had read or wanted to read. So I'm like, let's give it a try. Little did I know it would become my life's work. So I ended up in the Future Studies program at the University of Hawaii. And my mentor was this incredible man, still alive in his late 80s now. Jim Dator, who had been like the founder of the field. And the field itself came out of the 1970s and sort of that existential crisis moment when, nuclear weapons and sort of like Earth Day came in and people were sort of becoming conscious of the fact that we're really creating harm on the planet. And so there was a group of people that got together in Europe and said, we're thinkers, we're scholars, there's no field that studies the future. And so what's happening is we're just sort of blindly like charging forward into the future with no rigorous study of what we're actually doing as a species. I fell into that stream of work. And what was really amazing about the department I was in at the university was it was all these irreverent political scientists. So it was like, Indigenous politics folks, the Native Hawaiian leaders, they're amazing here in my state, feminists, anarchists, like all these not traditional political science. So I was exposed to a really wide array of very radical ideas around how the world works from a political perspective and started to understand that politics is just the study of power, which isn't everything. So that became really exciting and was a way for me to bring my activism into the world, because we immediately started doing workshops with, government groups or community groups and taking this futures work out to help people start remembering how they can imagine, dream, and create futures for themselves or for their organizations or for the world. So that then led me into leadership development. And by the time I got into that phase of things, we've talked about our shared interest in breath work. I realized that I had become so in my head. I was so like comfortable here, but I hadn't attended to like the neck down for a long time. And I was like, what's going on in my body? What's going on in my spirituality? So I leaned into energy healing work and I leaned into breath work as different modalities to re-embody myself so that this intellectual work I was doing could be fully embodied as I bring it out into the world. So it's been this journey of remembering the holistic parts of my whole self and seeing where these different threads along the way that I picked up have left me in a position to really see uniquely this moment from both a spiritual and political lens. And that's really what led into the book that I recently published. Was it feels like not unique to me, but there's a small, I think, cadre of people who are thinking from this perspective of the spiritual and the political are not separate. They're actually very deeply entangled from a perspective of, life affirming futures is what we're all, here to hope for. And what does it look like to untangle the systems that are making that impossible, that are really, in many ways enmeshed in creating destruction and violence on the planet. I think that's kind of been the core of what I've been thinking about lately and how to bring that to people so people can feel empowered, because we're in this really big moment of systems breakdown and it sort of comes in waves, but the waves will keep coming. And how do we ground ourselves, with different practices like the breath, and then also understand our role in the political moment, in our communities as we build new bridges to new ways of being as humans on the earth.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. There's so much in there. But I think one of the directions I want to go, because I love looking at the intersection between how the inner work that we do impacts what we see in the world, right? So
Yes.
at first I like to start with though, for you, when you said you realized you were kind of living all in your head and needed to get in your body, was there some kind of catalyzing moment or catastrophe or something that led you to make that realization?
Yeah, I think the big one was my relationship with alcohol as a numbing agent that was, sort of a socially acceptable numbing agent when the world would feel too overwhelming, combined with the Trump election in 2016, when I sort of saw, in many ways that the American dream or the American vision of this beautiful place where we have freedom at the center was being challenged. And it sent me into a spiral of online activism paired with a glass of wine. And I was like, this is just not working, and so I was all in my head and my body was being completely ignored and it was starting to impact my life. And so in 2020, I became what I call alcohol free, where to me it was a freedom moment of realizing that I didn't need these numbing agents, and also taming my relationship with social media and starting to become more fully embodied, and found the energy healing work. It kind of overlapped. I was feeling that need for something else, and then the energy healing work came in. And the way that we studied the energy body was really to see the different chakras and where woundings occur at each chakra throughout your life, mostly your early life, so your early childhood, which I know is a place you focus on a lot too. And for me, I found that a lot of my woundings were in my root and my first and second chakra, root and sacral. And so I did a lot of work around those, and that released all this literal energy in my body that I didn't know had been locked up, and allowed me to see that it was safe to be in my body, because I think I'd lived most of my life not safe. And that's where the alcohol had been like a way to feel safe in social situations where I maybe wouldn't have otherwise. So all of that became this like really profound healing moment. And then the pandemic hit. And so it also became this moment of like slowing everything down, really stopping the spin cycle of life, having that time to really just be with myself and my family and really lean into some of these practices that I was starting to be exposed to. So yeah, that was kind of like the explosion moment, I suppose, where I was like, okay, this isn't going to work anymore. This isn't working for me. It's not working for my family. It's not working for my health. There's got to be a new way. That's almost 7 years ago now, and it feels like everything has changed.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say 7 years ago, because I don't know if you like follow astrology at all, but
Yeah.
we're ending the 7-year Uranus cycle
Yes.
like this week.
Oh, that's right. Wow.
Yeah, it's this,
Yeah.
I think, so today's the 21st. I think the 25th, it officially enters Gemini. It's been interesting because it's been like coming up with a lot of my clients around just what they're feeling right now, but also like kind of looking back over the last 7 years and how everything that shifted in like specific areas of our lives in the last 7 years. And like, I know for me, if I look back 7 years ago, like my whole life looks completely different than it did 7 years ago.
Totally. Same. Yeah. And it's wild to think that much can shift. And the world looks really different. If we think about 7 years ago, how we thought about ourselves and our place and the future of the earth and like what's happening. And
I know, it's really interesting. And then I'm curious too, did you have your kids before that? Because I know sometimes when we have our kids, there's like that moment too of opening, but that was,
no,
your kids were older, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They were like 4 and 6, something like that. Yeah.
That can always be like a catalyzing thing too, just around how you look at everything. Totally. And just in terms of the future too, because like I remember when I had my son, who's my older one, and like when he first was born, it was the first time in my life I ever worried about the future.
Yeah. I think that's what it was for me, is I worried so much about the future. What really was a catalyst, which I think you'll find interesting, is I worried so much about the future because I was studying it, right? And I was studying collapse. I was studying this, different archetypes of the future, but the one that always drew me in was collapse. And just because it felt so in my bones, like that's where we're headed. But then I could also see that it was, things have to fall apart for new things to come through. So there's a positive aspect. But I had this feeling that like somehow I had to be doing these big things that would change the world. And there was like this heavy weight of like knowing what was coming and feeling like I was never doing enough. And so when I leaned into my body again and to the like quantum nature of spirituality and healing, and I realized that like all I can really control is myself. Remember at one moment my therapist said to me, she's like, we were talking about climate change or something in this therapy session. And she's like, you can't really help the world from burning if your house is on fire. And I was like, oh, got it. Like totally, like that just like hit me. I was like, you're right. Like if I don't attend to this first, which is literally the only thing I can control, then how can I do anything of good in the world? And so once I accepted that, and like the real true quantum nature of healing, that it ripples out and it has these outsized effects that we can't see, and how we touch people or how we show up. When I really like took that in, it was like a massive relief, because I'm like, oh, I actually don't have to change it all or be like the savior of the world. And I can't, like, it's just not even possible. Like, who am I to think that that's even like my job, So that was a big piece of it as well.
Yeah, I think about that a lot too, because like, as we have one crazy thing after another happen on the planet, I feel like people are like, well, what do you think about this? Or what are you going to do about this or whatever? And like, for me, I always come back to like, I'm going to do the thing that I know how to do.
Exactly. I have to do my piece.
Yeah, which is like help people heal. And that has a ripple effect. We all have our thing, right, that we're supposed to do. And like, we don't need to do anything other than that, because we're not supposed to do anything other than that, Obviously, I think we all are aware to some degree that we're in some sort of collapse right now. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that, just in terms of like where we're at, what that means to you, and like where you think we're going beyond that.
The hard part is the time cycles. Like, so it's hard to know how long these things will take, but we're definitely at the end of a cycle. And there's, so many different like ways of thinking about that. There's like the Indian Yuga cycle that people speak of. Some people say the Kali Yuga sort of started ending in 2025. Kali Yuga being like the dark times, moving into the Satya Yuga, which would be the golden age. We can look at, the ends of empires. The United States is sort of at its 250-year mark, which tends to be presidential democracies don't tend to last forever. They tend to devolve into authoritarianism at some point, if you look at like the annals of history. So we're like at all these different, and then there's the environmental collapses and sort of the thresholds of different environmental thresholds that we're crossing all over the place. And there's a certain level at which we all know in our gut that things aren't working out right. Like the way that we've set up our society, in the book I call it a fragile peace. Like you and I live in a fragile peace. We live in this relatively peaceful place. We don't worry generally about like our safety and security when we go to bed at night. Like we generally have food on the table and water to drink, for the most part. Obviously not everyone in our country, but for the most part. And all of that comes at the expense of millions of people in the dominant global culture, like most of the rest of the world, suffering in factories, in horrible conditions, being paid under wages that aren't enough to live on. Like the way that the system is set up for those of us who have been in this fragile peace, we're sort of like not aware that collapse has already happened in a lot of places. So there is like apocalyptic conditions in many parts of the world. And it's sort of like later coming to us, but it's starting to happen more and more. And we look at, things that are happening in the geopolitical world right now with, Iran and the Strait of Hormuz and just how fragile the systems are. That's part of what's really coming to light. And then all of the abuses happening with Epstein and all these things that are surfacing that are just horrifying and shocking, that are not new, but now we get to actually see them, apocalypse, the etymology of it is to uncover. And I think that's really what this time is the uncovering. So we're in that moment of uncovering. And then there's like this whole other subtext that I feel really blessed to be exposed to a lot in the work that I do, of people who've been like really diligently, slowly building the new beneath the old and are just like ready for when things fall apart to sort of step in. I could use the example here in Hawaii of the biocultural restoration work that's been happening for like the last 20, 30 years pretty intensely, where people are Native Hawaiian groups and others are taking over plots of land that were either left for garbage dump sites or just left not to be tended, and bringing back the old ways of doing agriculture, bringing back like the fish ponds and the kalo field, the taro fields. It's just happening quietly and softly and slowly, and there's all those kinds of regenerative projects happening around the world, people starting up, intentional communities, people starting up new ways of governance, people starting up different kinds of schooling systems. So I think all of that like mesh work is sort of the what's coming next. And it's much more decentralized. I've always thought that at some point we'll see the end of the nation state because it's a form that worked politically for a time. I don't think it's going to work in this global world where we can reach everybody at any moment through technology, where we like borders don't really make sense the way that they used to. So all of that stuff is shifting and changing. It's just some things will happen quicker and some things will happen slower. And we're in the messy middle, which is the hardest part, I think, because the new's not quite established and the old isn't quite working anymore. And so we're sort of left in this really potent space of uncertainty. So we got to get really good at being uncertain and riding the waves, and finding what we need in our personal practices and in our lives to be able to do that with grace.
Yeah, I love that. And I talk about this all the time, like getting uncomfortable in the uncertainty or the unknown, and how that there's actually so much magic there too, because if you can like feel safe in that and trust and like dance with that, that's where things really get to unfold in ways that you could never imagine. I remember just even as a kid, like looking at like what was going on, being like, well, this doesn't make any sense.
Totally.
And then like, I remember like hearing like on the news or something about, well, the country's in debt. And I'm like, but don't they like make the money? That sounds fake. Like, like as a kid, like thinking like, this is fake. This doesn't even like make sense,
Yeah.
And I think obviously like a lot of people feel that way. But I think one of the things, and maybe you can speak to this too, is like, I think one of the points of contention for people, or the thing that makes this stuff feel hard, is the idea that you can't rely on these things is scary, especially, because I noticed for a lot of my clients who, had parents who couldn't be there for them and, have a lot of unmet needs in that way.
Mhm.
Sometimes for them, a coping mechanism would be to like rely on like, okay, well, if I just follow the rules and I just do what I'm told and I work hard and I follow like the system, then I'll be safe, right? And I think that a lot of people unconsciously want to believe that that is still something they can rely on because it's scary to have to rely fully on yourself, and like the self-responsibility that would take is really scary. So like, just curious of your thoughts on that, because that's something I think about all the time.
Yeah, I love that question. And I think tying it back to sort of early childhood experiences and things that around like safety and chaos. And, I had a very similar experience as a child. And that totally makes sense that we would seek safety in these systems. And we have to realize that they're not stable, that they are uncertain. And so what does that mean for you in your life? And how might you start to explore different practices, modalities, ways of being and thinking that allow you to feel flexible and open? And that applies to every aspect of your life. Like, I think travel actually is one of the greatest ways that for our family, and especially with our kids, has allowed them to see that there's so many different ways to live in the world. And when you start to open your eyes to see like there's multiple ways to have a house, to live a life, to prepare food, like all the different things, it's like you get less calcified and feeling like this is my zone of safety. Because really, like, it's all up for grabs, it's always been that way, but especially in this moment, with AI coming on board, we don't know what that's going to do to the job market. It's definitely going to have disruptions. So, it's definitely a challenging time to be human. And it's an incredibly exciting time to be human because there are so many opportunities. Like you were saying about, to me, in the uncertainty is pure possibility because anything could happen, so it's another way to look at something that could feel scary. It's also a profound opportunity. And so I think also, when people can lean into the desire and excitement around learning, because we're learning machines. So if we can just start to see like, okay, how might I learn something new that then expands my horizon? And in your learning, follow your curiosity. So you're actually starting to build a life that is diverse, that has like lots of different ways you could go. So you don't feel so stuck in one pathway. I think that's really what we should all be doing right now. And there's an opportunity in that to explore maybe, things that you loved to do that you put by the wayside sometime back, pick them back up.
Yeah. And like one of the things that I talk about a lot too, that I feel like is related to this in the relational perspective, is I feel like a lot of the choices that we end up making in life are based on like what we think we have to do, or even like the roles we think we have to play as like a wife and a mom. And then we're like, well, why do I have so much anxiety? Or why am I so like resentful? And it's like, well, because you're doing stuff that you actually don't want to do, but you think you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's like a dismantling on all levels of like what you think things should be like what you think you need to do, and really looking at what actually makes sense, what works for me, and like what would actually make sense moving forward. And the innovation, I think, that comes from that,
Totally.
And
yeah. If everyone just remember, and part of it is remembering even what those things are, right? A lot of times, like I can remember coming to a point in my life where I'm like, who am I anyway? Like, I don't even remember who that person was, and having to go back to the little girl and remember what brought me joy. And, because I was on that pathway of success, like what are the steps you're supposed to take to do X, Y, and Z? And when you actually take the moment to remember who that person was and always is, so much can come through. And if all of us are doing that, or even just enough of us are doing that, the world will completely change in such a beautiful way, because we'll be living fulfilling lives, and that's all we're really here for, right? Is joy, happiness, connection, feeling of peace.
Yeah. And like what I notice too with people is like that thing that you're saying of like who you really are. When I help people like, clear what's in the way of that, it's never a thing of like, oh, I figured out what I want to do. It's like, no, oh, wait, I always knew. Oh, it's that thing, duh.
Yeah, it's so obvious. Yeah, that's true with our gifts a lot of times too. It feels so natural that we're like, that can't be my gift. That comes to me so easily. And it's like, yeah, that is your gift. That's why it comes to you so easily. Like we're almost trained to think that it has to be hard, and it doesn't. It can actually also be easeful and joyful.
Yeah. And I wanted to know too, in terms of bringing this work into the world, like I know you wrote your book and everything, and we can talk about that more, but how do you work with clients around like building the future?
I've done like individual coaching with people and like what I call fulfillment coaching. So finding what's fulfilling for them. And it's usually a lot of people that are at a crossroads of like, do I stay in this job? Do I leave this job? Things are changing in my family. What do I really want? So I love doing that kind of one-on-one work. And then when I work with organizations, I really sit in the seat of vision and sort of tying vision to strategy, but vision from like a really far term futures perspective. So like, what is this work going to do in 10, 20 years? And how is it going to serve the world? So currently I work with a fellowship of activists around the world called the Rhizome Fellowship. And we're really supporting them to use story and narrative as a tool of systems change. So if we think about the way we story the world into being, that we tell stories again about how things are supposed to work, like what does a good wife do? What does a good marriage look like? What does a home look like? How does the world work? We story that into being all the time. So we help people understand the power of story and narrative and use it in their activism to do social impact and environmental impact work. And then I work with another organization called Project Biome that's really looking to regenerate Earth and work with Earth systems to regenerate and also reconnect humans to nature. I think that's a key piece of what I love doing, is helping people remember that we're Earthlings, that we're from Earth, like we're made of Earth stuff. And so any spaces that I can help like reconnecting, because there's so much joy in reconnecting with the Earth. We started a farm over here in Hawaii, and just like we bring kids together every week. We recently had the flood, so we're sort of on pause, but we brought homeschool kids together every week to put their hands in the dirt and like remember the Earth. And that to me is futures work, because it's helping kids remember that they're part of this planet, and stuff happens when you're like connected with Earth in that way that you don't even expect.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know for me, it's like the ocean, and like that is like what makes me feel like so connected to myself. It's just like the power in that. It's hard to even like explain. That and the sun.
And I think the abundance of nature is such an important touch point in uncertainty, because it's so stable, and it's so, even with climate change and all these disasters that we're feeling, it's like nature has this abundance that she just continues to give. Like you said, the sun and the ocean, the sun rises every day, doesn't expect anything back, provides all of this life, and you can touch into that and have gratitude for the abundance that's always readily available. It starts to retune your inner instrument to something else, like in terms of a frequency of safety and security that's bigger than just your life,
Yeah, and like a balance too, because I feel like with breath work, I always say like the body has a natural rhythm, and then like when you get into that rhythm with the breath, your body naturally will find like homeostasis, right? By like releasing what it needs to release, and you're just like creating that space. And it's like nature is the same. It will naturally find balance even when you like do crazy things. It somehow will find balance. And I think that is something to ground into in terms of like safety and stability and how we move forward in general.
Well, another thing I was just coming to mind as you're saying that is just becoming really present. I think nature helps us do that too. But the more we can become like really present to the moment, we can be like, okay, I might have these like worries or anxieties, but again, those are sort of like future projections. What's actually happening right now? Am I safe and secure? Okay, I am. So then where can I come from a more grounded place? I try to tell people and my clients, it's like, what if it all works out? Like, what if you told the story instead of the worry and the anxiety? What's the story of how it all works out? And if you start telling yourself that story all the time, what changes in your ability to be present in your life and feel happy? Because it could go either way. Yes, the worries and anxieties could come true, or the beautiful future that you've been envisioning could come true. So wouldn't you rather tell the more beautiful story? We have a choice.
Yeah. And also, I think we kind of have to be willing to go to experience whatever is uncomfortable too. You know what I mean? And not try to prevent ourselves from getting hurt or feeling anything negative, because it's like all part of the human experience.
Totally. Yeah. There's a way in which each bit of it is a lesson. That's what's happened for me with the floods that we just had here in Hawaii. I really realized there was such a profound lesson for my community. We had these massive floods that happened last month that destroyed lots of homes. Luckily nobody died, but it was big. And changed the fabric of the community, and it brought the community together, in a way that never would have happened otherwise without that hardship, where people now know each other's names, people know how to find each other, people know, where the elderly people in the community are, people are connecting and starting to these mutual aid networks that have sprung up. So even in the face of, calamity or disaster, there's so much goodness that comes through. And I think that's true on every level in our personal lives, all the way out to the global.
Yeah, I forget where I heard this, and I always say it and I can't remember where I heard it, but it was basically like, if someone who'd never been to Earth before came to Earth and then like the winter happened, they would think like, oh my gosh, everything's dying, the world is over.
Yeah.
Right? Like not knowing that that's like a natural part of the cycle, and that has to happen in order for things to be reborn. Yeah. And I think it's like what you're saying, it's like we have to go through the winter and the dying and the sadness in order to experience like what's coming out on the other side.
Yeah, and to have the sense of perspective to know that there will be another side, right?
Yes.
I'm sure that's a lot of what you do with your clients too, is to help them see like this might feel hard right now, but it will end, it will pass.
Yeah, so much of it is like walking people. Like I always say with, helping people feel the deeper suppressed emotions from childhood, I'm just like taking you by the arm with a flashlight and I'm walking you through the tunnel, like onto the other side. So, you know where you're going. Because if not, you can just get lost, in the emotion of it and not know where to go. So yeah, it's so important to like have that perspective. I think in terms of just thinking about the future in general, obviously I know not everybody is going to be focusing on this in the same way, but like what are some like perspectives like people can take, or ways that even within ourselves we can start to intentionally create the future in the way that we want to experience it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things I think in terms of an opportunity right now in this time of uncertainty is to really start to get familiar with your place, your community, your place, whatever you might think. I think I know a lot of us in the US, we're very disconnected from our place and from our neighbors. And it's a really profound time to start to get to know like who is in your neighborhood, what sort of place do you live in, what is that place all about? Start to deepen some of those ties, which really is like a much richer way to live anyway. But we've just been trained in this sort of isolated, separated society to live in our little boxes and do our little thing and go into our little car box, then go to our work box and come home back to our house box. It's like we just are busting out of those walls. I think that's really important right now, because we can't rely necessarily on the systems to be there for us all the time, especially, when things like this disaster for us happen, and they're happening more and more, you realize how important community is. So that's one way to start to lean into your future. And I think for people that want to start thinking productively about the future they want for their life, just really allow yourself to vision beyond what you've been taught is the way you're supposed to live. Because there's an opportunity now. AI is such a hot topic, and there's a lot of doom and gloom around AI. And I think that is definitely true. And there's like a whole other side that's a potentiality of AI. My mentor, Jim Dater, used to always say, full unemployment is the goal. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, imagine, this is years ago before AI was really a thing on the scene, but he could see it coming. And he's like, when that happens, we will be freed to be creative beings, to surf and spend time with our family and paint and draw and write. And, so what if that future is possible? Like, what is the kind of life you would want to live if you were fully given freedom to live it? And if you can even take a small step in that direction. So again, there might be something you loved to do as a kid. You love to sing, or like my friend just started a choir in town,
that's cool.
next to us. It's so cool. And it's a bunch of, women about our age coming together, some men, and singing, because she's like, she loved to sing as a kid. She's like, I want to do choir again, and so maybe it's singing, maybe it's dancing, maybe it's painting, maybe it's writing, maybe it's hiking, whatever it might be that you've been putting off. Start finding ways to build these things back into your life, planning for a future where you're living in a thriving way, to start to untangle the deep roots that we've been programmed to think success looks a certain way. Like, look for the spaces where you feel that uneasiness of like, I know this isn't fully my choice. We're in lives that we can't just like change tomorrow everything. As you have to sort of pull it apart. But where might you start to make those small shifts and changes is a really good way to start moving towards a future that you want to live into.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny because I've been thinking about this a lot just in terms of with ways I've been supporting my clients, but also like in my own business, because it actually feels to me, because I really do things in terms of following the energy. Because like, you know, when I first started my business, I would like push really hard for things. And then like, I realized that doesn't work. And especially now, I feel like the energy now, it just doesn't even feel right to do that. And the other night I volunteer for this like Jewish nonprofit where they like pair you up with a mentee. Like I'm a mentor for like someone in their 20s, like building her career or whatever. So there was an event for the organization and it was like speed mentoring. So like instead of speed dating. So like I was like standing at a table and then like groups of mentees would come up to me and then they would put a new question up and then I would answer the question. And like, it was just so fun. Like I was literally like so energized. And then I got home and I'm like, okay, that was so much fun. And then I was like, oh, what are the things that are just so fun for me, like in my business? And those are the things that I want to focus on. And I feel like what I'm seeing a lot too is when my clients or whoever are like still trying to like apply forcing or like overly strategy and not coming from that place of just like, I love this. Like, this is so fun. And like, let that be leading what we do instead of like what you think you have to do or, you know, what makes sense like strategically. Cause I also feel like that stuff isn't really working anymore either.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a function of the fact that so much is now available to us. Like there are ways to build, make, do things that we didn't have just a couple of years ago. You know, and again, that's the positive side of something like AI. I just heard yesterday, you can make like these incredible presentations with like Google Notebook or something it's called. I didn't know anything about it. These things are just happening all over the place. So we actually can start to like let our curiosity and our joy lead, and then opportunities open up. I heard another friend say recently, a key lever of us knowing that you're on a successful path is if most people can't understand what you do for a living.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Creative moment, I think, where a lot of people have like 5 or 6 different things that they do, and it's very kind of entrepreneurial. It's very kind of creative. It's very expanded. It's not the typical, you know, get a job in a corporation and work your way up the ladder to 40 years later get a retirement. Like that paradigm has just shifted, because you'll be more successful if you're joyful in the work. You're going to be more magnetic. You're going to attract more people to what you're doing, and you're going to serve a need that exists in the world. And if all those things are happening, you're going to be successful, you know, and I think that's really a shift in mindset that we have to take on.
I mean, I've been feeling too, like the thing that really lights me up too is just like connecting with people and like talking about this work, but not in a way where I'm trying to like get anything out of it. You know what I mean? Like it's just like for the joy of it and like letting that be the thing and just allowing myself to experience that and like that being it, you know, there doesn't have to be like a transactional energy around it, you know, because I feel like that is just kind of that old paradigm where it's like, okay, well, let me talk to this person because maybe I'll get something out of it. And like, I feel like that energy is just so anymore. And I feel like it's like, it just feels like we're kind of evolving beyond that because like the energy just feels so different now.
It's so true. Yeah. And I think this like 7 planets in Aries thing that just happened was like,
I know.
Was wild. That whole day, new moon, I was like, oh my God, it felt like we popped through into something else. Like I woke up Saturday morning, everything feels different. I don't know what it is. Like just
I know. Well, it's crazy because I feel bad for everyone in my life because all I talk about is astrology.
Well, the astrology's been crazy.
It's crazy. And like, I started studying astrology as like a teenager, and like, I'm not an astrologer, but like at this point, I just know a lot. And I like, so I'm literally talking about it all the time, especially because now it's like the type of thing where, well, I didn't care about the weather, but now we're having like 5 hurricanes in a row. So I'm going to pay attention.
Exactly. Yes, something is going on.
Yeah. And I think the shifts are palpable, whether you're in it or not. You can just feel the energetic shift and like the way people aren't like caring about the same things or operating in the same way. And I think there's this level of human connection that is really important right now beyond anything else.
Well, and you look at like why we're doing all these things. Like, why are we doing all the things that we do? At the end of the day, it's to feel a sense of fulfillment, joy, peace in your life, feel happy, to feel like your life is a beautiful experience, right? And so how do we make sure we lean towards those directions rather than all the things we've been told will make us feel a certain way? It's like we know ourselves, or if we don't, let's do that work to get to know ourselves again. And I think in the example you shared too about the mentees service, we've forgotten how good service feels. Like being in service to something bigger than ourselves feels so good. It's like such a beautiful way to show up. So, if there's ways for people that are trying to get unstuck, put yourself in service. I remember for myself when I was trying to get pregnant, it wasn't coming as quickly as I had hoped. I started doing this thing. It was called Circle of Love Letters or something like that. And it was this beautiful practice where I'd get given the name of a person who was going through a really hard time. And I would not know them. And I would write them a letter, like a card, an actual physical letter. And it was so beautiful to just be putting out this love and this service with no expectation of return, not even needing to see the person who it was. So anything like that you can find where you can be of service, it really creates, so much lushness.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, there's like this Buddhist thing where it's like, say you want to create a new job or something, then like you help someone else find a new job or whatever.
Yes.
Like that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. It comes around. It really does up level your frequency and your experience. And you said like you came home energized. You just like jammed like in this super fast paced experience and you came home with more energy. Like look for the places in your life where the experiences are giving you more energy. I do that a lot, even on my Zoom calls, because some Zoom calls I leave and I'm like super energized, and others I leave and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so dead to the world right now. And it's like, what's going on in those spaces? And that's true in personal interactions too. But if you just start paying attention to those things, you'll start refining what you choose to put your energy towards, and you'll get more information on what really lights you up.
Yeah. And also I think like how you choose to show up too, because I think like certain scenarios or circumstances or people can like cause you to drop your power or show up in a certain way, maybe unconsciously, that if you like realize that's happening, you can be like, oh, well, okay, how can I show up in that space so like I feel better? If it's something that you do have to show up in, or just even learning from that. How did I feel? Why did I feel that way? What was happening there? Instead of just like thinking like, oh, that's what it is, or, oh, I just have anxiety. And it's like, well, no, that's coming from somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about the book, because I know we don't have a lot of time left. So I'd love to hear all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a copy here. It's called Our Beloved Futures. You can see that. It's a tree of life cover. And it was a really interesting experience writing the book. I've always been a writer. I'd love to write, written poetry my whole life since I was a little kid. Did the dissertation thing and like had this body of work from my academic world and thought I'd publish that. And then it sort of didn't happen. And then I was like, I really feel the call to write. And I wasn't sure what it was going to be. And I originally thought I would just pull together all my poems over the years and create a book of poetry. And then I ended up in this writing cohort and started, just really leaning into like what's wanting to come through in this moment. And these transmissions started coming through that were downloads of the enmeshment of the political experiences I'd had and like the spiritual experiences I'd had and sort of what I wanted to share with the world in this moment of, what I call the great unweaving. And the great turning is another word that's been used for this time. Also the Kali Yuga, all the different things. I call it mythopoetic because it's written in a very poetic type of prose, but it's also tied to our energy body because those teachings have been so profound for me in leaning into understanding that we have an energy body and that our chakra system actually is a profound system for calibration, for balancing, for grounding, for health. And so I go through the first part of the book is really talking about this moment we're in. And I use the metaphor of the butterfly, and the going into the chrysalis and turning into goo and how it literally dissolves into nothingness. And that's when the imaginal cells are awoken within the caterpillar's old body. These cells have been dormant, thinking they were always alone. And then they get awoken by the chrysalis moment when the body dissolves and they find each other and they start to build the body of the butterfly. And I think we're really in that moment of dissolution where we feel the gooiness of like nothing makes sense and everything everything's kind of up for grabs and I don't even know what's happening right now. And from that, we're finding each other, right? We're finding the others that we really resonate with. We're remembering ourselves and remembering our divine blueprint of what's to come, which is the butterfly. So I speak about that a lot in the first part of the book and different ways to envision that and understand our place within it, always tying us back to being earthlings of earth. Like that's really for me the core message is that we came from earth, we returned to earth, we're here for a short time, we're super connected to this planet. So like let's celebrate that and remember that as like a joyful part of our existence. And then I go through the different chakras and speak to how each one, relates to a different part of this great turning that we're in this unweaving that's happening both within ourselves and in the greater planetary experience. So, my hope is that it's a book that awakens something in each of us to remember that ancient part of ourselves that is also, the future ancestor that will be for someone else to look back on. And what does it mean to be alive right now? So it's a book of hope and a book of truth telling, of the moment that we're in.
Wow, I love that. Well, first of all, it's so funny because I don't know if I talked to you about this, but my methodology is called the metamorphosis method.
Yes, I remember that. Yes, I love that.
Yeah, so I love that because I feel like anytime someone talks about the butterfly, I'm like,
yep. You're like,
and I mean, I know it's like a common thing. It's such a powerful metaphor,
Totally.
of literally like turning to goo and then like transforming into something completely different. And the fact that like we can do that and we do that and to like be able to trust that, it's super powerful.
Yeah, and it's like the butterfly doesn't begrudge the caterpillar. The butterfly's not like, oh man, I was a caterpillar for too long. The butterfly's just like, yes, I'm a butterfly now. It's like there's no like regret for the caterpillar's experience. It's like all part of the unfolding. And I think there's something really beautiful in that as we let ourselves like, yes, grieve what we're losing, but also embrace what's coming. And it can be so beautiful, if we really do that work within and without.
Yeah. And also the caterpillar isn't like, why aren't I a butterfly yet?
Totally. It's just happy eating leaves. It's like getting fatter and fatter and fatter until it's like so fat. And it's a metaphor of the times, it's like we're in this overly consumptive moment as humans. We're just rapaciously consuming the planet like the caterpillar. And now we're like, okay, that's not working anymore. We're going to melt into the goo and something else is going to come. And I think that's the precipice we're on, which again, that's where the uncertainty can be exciting because what comes next could be so beautiful.
Yeah. And also I think there's something really profound in just like everything's always changing and change is always happening and like just getting comfortable in and like embracing that too, I think is so important.
It's the only thing that's constant, right? Is change.
Yeah. Exactly. We'll definitely link your book below because I definitely want to get a copy and read
I'll send
it.
you a copy.
Okay, amazing. Yeah. Thank you. That sounds incredible. And thank you for sharing all this. I feel like I have so many more questions, but I know.
I'm so glad that we've been woven in this way and that we're really.
I know. Yeah, this is amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I know everyone's going to love it. And thanks for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us.
Yeah, thank you, Elise. Great to be with you.
Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to follow the show on Apple or Spotify, leave a review, and share the show with your friends who you know are yearning for this type of content. When you leave a review, send us a screenshot and we'll send you a $250 credit that you can apply to joining anything new in my world. You can stay connected with me by following me on Instagram at Elise_Breeds. Make sure you download my Clear Trauma cheat sheet at EliseBreeds.com. See you next time.